The morning Marcus pulled into the Meridian Capital parking lot, he already knew he did not belong there. Not because he felt small. He had not felt small in a very long time. He knew it because the lot itself told him. Every car in it was new, clean, and silent. The kind of car that costs more than most people make in a year, and is driven by people who have forgotten that. His truck was none of those things. It was a 2003 Ford F-150, the color of dried rust and old mud, with a crack running across the rear bumper like a map of somewhere nobody wanted to go. The tailgate was held together with a zip tie he had put on 3 winters ago, and never replaced. The engine knocked a little when it idled. The driver's side mirror had a crack in the corner that split the reflection in two, so when Marcus checked it, he always saw himself doubled. He parked between 2 black sedans that probably cost a combined $400,000. He sat for a moment. He looked at the building through his cracked windshield. Meridian Capital was 40 floors of glass and steel in downtown Charlotte, the kind of building that is designed to make people feel something specific before they even walk through the door. Small, impressed, aware of the distance between themselves and the people inside. Marcus had seen buildings like this his whole life. He had stood outside them. He had delivered things to their service entrances. He had waited in their lobbies on chairs that were placed exactly far enough from the reception desk to remind you that you were waiting. He picked up his folder from the passenger seat. A single folder, cream-colored, not thick. He straightened his tie in the cracked mirror and got out of the truck. The lobby was cold in the way that expensive buildings are always cold, like the temperature itself is a statement. The floors were polished marble. The ceiling was high enough to make sound behave strangely, footsteps arriving a half-second after they should. A young man at the reception desk looked up, and then looked past Marcus at the truck visible through the glass, and then looked back at Marcus, and all 3 of those looks happened in under 2 seconds. Marcus gave his name. He said he had a meeting. He said the name of the man he was meeting, a senior acquisitions director named Paul, who had contacted Webcor Logistics 6 weeks ago with a proposal. Paul had been professional on every call, thorough in every email. The meeting today was the natural next step. The receptionist typed something, nodded, asked Marcus to take a seat. He sat. The chair was low and the table beside it had a glass of water on it, with a lemon slice floating at the top. Marcus did not touch the water. He looked at the folder in his hands and thought about the drive up from Tulsa, which he had made 2 days ago, because he had wanted to arrive without rushing. He thought about Kara, who had called him last night to tell him to wear the blue tie, not the gray one. He was wearing the blue one. He thought she was probably right, though he would never tell her that until she asked. He had been sitting for 6 minutes when the elevator opened. She walked out the way people walk out of elevators when they own the building, which Diana Voss essentially did. She was the CEO of Meridian Capital, 38 years old, 2-time Forbes honoree, and she moved through the lobby like water moving through a space it has already decided to fill. Her assistant was behind her, tablet up, head down, reading something aloud in a low voice. Diana Voss did not look at Marcus. She looked at the truck. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the lobby wall, his F-150 sat between the 2 black sedans like a wrong answer on a test. The rust on the rear quarter panel caught the morning light in a way that made it impossible to miss. The zip-tied tailgate. The cracked bumper. She said something to her assistant. 3 words. Low enough to be private, loud enough to carry. Wrong zip code. Her assistant smiled. One of the security guards near the door looked away at something that was not there. A woman waiting for the elevator covered her mouth, though she was not coughing. Marcus heard it. He looked up from his folder. He looked at Diana Voss. She had already looked away, was already moving toward the door, already 3 steps past the moment as though it had not happened, as though the words had never left her mouth. He did not say anything. He watched her walk out through the glass doors. He watched her get into a black car that was already waiting. He watched the car pull out of the lot smoothly, without hesitation. He sat for another moment. Paul appeared from a side hallway, apologetic, hand extended, saying something about the traffic on the elevator. Marcus stood. He shook Paul's hand. He said it was no problem. They went up to the 32nd floor. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. Marcus answered every question Paul asked with the same calm, steady voice he had used for 20 years, in rooms that underestimated him. He laid out the Webcor numbers. revenue, margins, growth trajectory, fleet size, employee count, geographic reach. Paul was a careful man, the kind who writes everything down in a small notebook with a good pen. He wrote a great deal during those 45 minutes. At the end, Paul said they would be in touch within the week. He said the numbers were strong. He said he appreciated Marcus making the trip. Marcus said it was no trouble. He took the elevator back down to the lobby. He walked across the marble floor. He pushed through the glass doors and into the parking lot and got into his truck. He sat for a moment. He took out his phone and called his daughter. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did. "How did it go?" "Fine," he said. "The numbers landed." "Good. Are you driving back tonight?" "Tomorrow morning." She said something about dinner, about a place near his hotel she had looked up, about them having a good steak. He said that sounded all right. She talked for a minute more. She had this way of filling silences that was not nervous, just warm. The way a fire fills a room without asking permission. He did not tell her what the woman in the lobby had said. He put the truck in reverse. The engine knocked once, settled. He pulled out of the space between the two black sedans and drove out of the Meridian Capital lot and into the Charlotte morning, and the truck moved the way it always moved, steady and a little loud and entirely unbothered. He stopped at a red light 2 blocks away, looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror. Both versions of him looked back. He had driven worse trucks than this. He had sat in lobbies colder than that one. He had heard things like what Diana Voss said, and things much worse, in smaller towns, from people with much less to show for themselves. He had heard all of it, and kept building anyway. The way a river keeps moving through rock, not because the rock is weak, but because the river does not stop. The light turned green. He drove. Marcus Webb had not always been the kind of man who could sit in a lobby and absorb an insult without flinching. That kind of stillness is not a personality. It is something you build slowly, the way you build anything worth having, through repetition and loss and the decision, made over and over again, to keep going anyway. He grew up in a small town outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, the second of 3 children, raised by a father who repaired appliances for a living, and a mother who worked the early shift at a hospital laundry. They were not poor, in the way that means desperate, but they were poor in the way that means careful. Every dollar had a conversation attached to it. Every decision had a consequence that could not be ignored. His father drove an old pickup truck for 30 years, not because he loved trucks, because it worked. Because what matters about a vehicle is whether it gets you where you are going, and everything else is theater. Marcus heard that lesson so many times as a boy that it settled into him like concrete settles into a foundation. He stopped hearing it as advice and started experiencing it as fact. He was 22 when he met Claire. She was at a community college in Tulsa, studying accounting, working 2 jobs, living with her aunt. She had this way of laughing that was completely uncontrolled, like it started somewhere deep and arrived without her permission. She laughed at everything. She laughed at Marcus, at herself, at the universe in general, which she seemed to find endlessly, wonderfully absurd. They were married when he was 25. She was 23. They had almost nothing. They had each other, and a small apartment, and a plan that they made up as they went. He was working for a regional freight company then, driving routes through 3 states, learning every road and terminal and loading dock the way some people learn music, by feel, by repetition, by paying attention to what everyone else ignores. He started noticing things. He noticed which routes were inefficient and which dispatchers were careless. He noticed where goods sat too long and where they moved too fast, and which gaps in the network cost companies money they did not realize they were losing. He noticed that the people making decisions about logistics were often the people farthest away from the actual roads and trucks and drivers. They had spreadsheets. He had windshield time. The difference was enormous. He started writing things down. Not in a formal way, just notes, in a small notebook he kept in the truck. Observations, patterns, ideas for how the system could move better. Claire read those notebooks at night sometimes. She would sit across from him at their small kitchen table with a mug of tea and read his scrawled notes with the same attention she gave her accounting textbooks, which was absolute. She was the one who said, the first time, that he should do something with this. that the knowledge in those notebooks was worth more than what he was being paid to ignore it. He told her she was being generous. She told him she was being accurate. Kara was born 2 years into their marriage. She arrived in the way babies arrive, without warning or schedule, a small person with enormous opinions about the world. She had Claire's eyes and Marcus's stubbornness, which Claire said was a dangerous combination, and Marcus said was a survival tool. Those first years with Kara were the best years of his life. He knows that now in a way he did not know it then. Then he was inside it, too close to see the shape of it. Now, looking back, he can see what it was. A complete thing, a family at its beginning, still learning the shape of itself, still soft at the edges. Claire got sick when Kara was 2. It was fast. That is the word people use, fast, and it is the right word. But it does not tell you what fast means when it is happening to you. Fast means that the person you are building your life with is there in January and gone by October, and the world between those 2 months is something you survive but do not understand. Marcus was 30 when Claire died. Kara was 3. He did not fall apart. He wanted to. He had the capacity for it. He could feel it, the way you feel a wave before it hits, the enormous weight of it, gathering behind everything he did, for weeks after the funeral. He woke up at night with it pressing on his chest. He sat in the parking lot of the grocery store with it sitting in the car beside him. He felt it when he gave Kara her bath and she asked where Mommy was, using the present tense, still expecting an answer that made sense. He did not fall apart because Kara was there. Not because he was strong, because she needed breakfast, because she needed someone to hold her hand crossing the street, because she needed someone to check under the bed and confirm there was nothing there, because she needed him, specific and irreplaceable, and the weight of that need was somehow the only thing strong enough to hold the other weight at bay. He sold the apartment. He moved into a smaller place, cheaper. He called Claire's mother, who came to stay for 3 months and helped him figure out daycare and schedules and how to do a small girl's hair, which was its own education. He went back to work. He kept the notebook. 6 months after Claire's funeral, Marcus sat in his small kitchen at 2 in the morning, Kara asleep in the next room, and looked at 5 years of notes and thought about what Claire had said, that the knowledge was worth more than what he was being paid to ignore it. He made a decision. He took what was left of their savings, which was not much. He rented a storage unit on the east side of Tulsa, which was cheaper than office space, which was cheaper than anything else he could find. He put a folding table in it and a chair and his laptop and his notebooks. He called the storage unit Webcore Logistics, because he needed to call it something, and because it was his, and it was a core thing, and Webb was his name. He wrote his first contract proposal at that folding table at 3 in the morning, while Kara slept. The company that received it was a mid-size manufacturing firm outside Tulsa that had been losing money in its shipping operation for 2 years. Marcus knew exactly where the money was going. He had watched it go. He wrote a proposal that was specific to the point of being uncomfortable, because vague proposals get polite rejections and specific ones get meetings. He got a meeting. He drove to that meeting in the F-150, which he had bought the previous month because it ran, and because the price was what he could afford. He wore the same suit he had worn to his wedding. He brought his notebook. He got the contract. That was the beginning. The next 3 years were the kind of years that do not make good stories, because they are made entirely of repetition. He worked. He built the contracts one at a time, slowly, the way you build anything that is meant to last. He hired his first driver in the 2nd year, a man named Dale who had 20 years on the road, and who Marcus paid more than he could honestly afford, because Dale was worth it, and Marcus knew what it felt like to be paid less than you were worth. Kara grew up in the middle of all of it. She grew up going to daycare, and then school, and then doing her homework at the folding table, while Marcus worked beside her, and later at a real desk, when the storage unit became an office, and the office became a building. She grew up watching her father read contracts at dinner, and take calls at 6 in the morning, and drive the truck through ice and rain and heat, to meetings in cities she had not heard of yet. She grew up learning without being taught. By the time Kara was 10, Webcore had operations in 5 states. By the time she was 15, it had grown to 9. She started asking real questions by the time she was 12, not kid questions, real ones, about margins and route efficiency, and why certain contracts were better than others. Marcus answered them the same way he answered everything, directly, without talking down, without simplifying past the truth. She was a better student than he had been. She had Claire's precision with numbers, and Marcus's ability to read a room, a combination that was, as he had suspected, extremely dangerous. She applied to Wharton at 17. She was accepted. She called him from her school library, whispering, and he could hear in her voice that she was trying not to cry, and doing a poor job of it. He sat in his truck in the parking lot of the Webcor Operations Center in Tulsa and said, quietly, that her mother would have been loud about this, not whispering. Kara laughed, uncontrolled, starting somewhere deep, just like Claire. He drove back to the Webcor lot that night with 214,000 miles on the F-150 and $340 million in company assets, and a zip-tied tailgate, and the complete, unshakable feeling that everything he had built had been worth building. He had not replaced the truck. He thought sometimes about what his father had said, that what matters about a vehicle is whether it gets you where you are going. He had been in that truck for 17 years. It had gotten him everywhere he needed to go. He saw no reason to change that now. When Diana Voss looked at that truck in the Meridian parking lot and said what she said, she was looking at a vehicle. She was not looking at what the vehicle had carried. She was not looking at the 17 years of 6 a.m. starts and folding table contracts and a little girl doing homework in a storage unit, and a man who turned grief into something that outlasted it. She was not looking at any of that. She was looking at Rust. And she had no idea. Kara Webb had one rule that she applied every time she walked into a new professional space. She did not lead with her last name. Not because she was hiding anything. Not because she was ashamed. She led with her first name and her work and her ideas. And she let those things establish who she was before the last name arrived, and changed the temperature of the room. She had watched her whole life what happened when people knew whose daughter she was before they knew who she was, and she had decided, at some point in her teenage years, that she would not let that happen. So at Meridian Capital, she was Kara. Just Kara. She wore quiet clothes and sat in the middle of conference rooms, rather than at the ends, and listened more than she spoke in the first 2 weeks, which is the opposite of what most people do when they are trying to prove something. She was not trying to prove anything. She was trying to learn the shape of the place. Meridian Capital was a mid-size investment firm with a strong acquisition arm and a reputation for being aggressive in its pursuit of undervalued companies in the logistics and infrastructure sectors. It was exactly the kind of firm that should have already known about Webcor. The fact that it did not told Kara something specific about the quality of its research. She filed that observation away. The internship was structured, 8 weeks. 4 of them in the acquisitions division, 2 in portfolio management, 2 floating between departments. There were 6 other interns. They were all sharp, competitive in the quiet way that costs money to develop, eager to be noticed. Kara was not eager to be noticed. She was eager to understand. In her first week, she read every acquisition the firm had made in the past 4 years. Not summaries. The actual files, the due diligence reports, the financial models, the post-acquisition performance reviews. She read them the way her father read roadmaps, not for the destination but for the pattern. Where was the firm going? What was it looking for? Where was it consistently missing things it should have seen? She found the pattern by the end of week 1. Meridian was excellent at identifying companies with strong brand presence and good surface-level financials. It was less excellent at identifying companies with strong operational infrastructure but low public visibility. Companies that did not advertise their value because their value was in their efficiency rather than their image. These were companies built by people who had spent their careers focused on the work, not on being known for the work. She knew that kind of company. She had grown up inside one. In her 3rd week, she was assigned to assist a senior analyst named Greg on a portfolio review. Greg was 34, meticulous, and not particularly interested in intern input. He assigned her the parts of the analysis that required the most time and the least judgment, which is the standard arrangement. She did those parts quickly, and then went further than she was asked to go. She built a supplemental model. It was not flashy. It was a quiet, methodical analysis of 3 logistics companies in the Mid-South region, that she believed Meridian's pipeline was significantly undervaluing, based on operational metrics that the standard valuation framework did not adequately weight. She checked her numbers 4 times. She had a habit of checking things 4 times that she had developed from watching her father check things 4 times. She gave it to Greg without ceremony, just a folder on his desk with a note that said she thought it might be useful, and that she was happy to walk through the methodology if he had questions. Greg read it that evening. He brought it to Paul the next morning. Paul read it that afternoon. Paul brought it to Diana Voss the following Wednesday, 3 weeks into Kara's internship, presented as a piece of analysis that had come up through the team, which was technically accurate, and also the way things move in firms like this. Diana read the memo at 11 on a Wednesday night, sitting in her office on the 32nd floor, with a cold cup of coffee on her desk, and the city spread out below her in a way she no longer noticed. She read the memo once, and then read it again more slowly. It was specific, in a way that most intern work was not. It was specific in a way that most senior analyst work was not. It identified a company called Webcor Logistics with a level of operational understanding that went beyond what any standard research process would produce. The analysis knew things about how Webcor operated that were not in any public filing or industry report. It knew about the route efficiency model Marcus had built in the early years. It knew about the driver retention rate, which was abnormally high. It knew about the profit margin on the regional contracts, which were better than any competitor in the sector. It read, Diana thought, like something written by someone who had been inside the company. She called Kara into her office the next morning. Kara arrived without a notebook. She sat in the chair across from Diana's desk and waited. She had a way of waiting that was completely still, no fidgeting, no nervous energy. Just a person in a chair, present and unhurried. Diana had been in enough meetings to know that kind of stillness is unusual. It is not natural to most people. It is either trained or inherited. She asked about the methodology. Kara explained it clearly, without rushing, using simple language for the complex parts in the way that people do when they genuinely understand something, rather than when they are performing the understanding of it. Diana asked 3 follow-up questions. Kara answered all 3 correctly, including one that Diana had designed to be a trap, a question with a false premise built into it. Kara spotted the false premise without pointing it out as such, just corrected the underlying assumption, and answered what the question would have been if it had been accurate. Diana sat back in her chair. She asked where Kara had learned to read operational structure the way she did. Kara said, "My father." Diana asked if her father was in logistics. There was a pause, not a nervous one, a deliberate one, the kind that means something is being weighed. Kara said, "He built it." She reached into the folder she had brought and took out a single sheet, a company profile, clean and simple, the kind of document that says everything it needs to say in 1 page because the numbers are strong enough to do the talking. She placed it on the desk. Diana looked at the header. Webcor Logistics. Founder, Marcus A. Webb. The lobby came back to her with a clarity that was not comfortable. The glass wall, the parking lot, the rust-colored truck between 2 black sedans, the words she had said to her assistant, low enough to be private, loud enough to carry. 3 words. She had not thought about them after she said them. She had been out of the building and into her car and into her day, and the moment had been a small one, a reflex, gone as soon as it was past. She had not thought about the man sitting in the lobby. She had not thought about what he was there for. She thought about it now. She looked at the profile sheet on her desk. She looked at Kara, who was watching her with an expression that was neither hostile nor forgiving, just even, just present. The same expression, Diana would realize much later, that Marcus Webb had worn in the lobby. She said nothing for a moment. Kara did not fill the silence. Finally, Diana said, "How long have you known he was in our pipeline?" Kara said, "Since the 2nd week. And you didn't say anything. You didn't ask." Diana looked at the profile sheet again. The valuation figure was in the bottom right corner. She looked at it for a long time. Outside, Charlotte moved the way Charlotte always moved, without knowing or caring about what was happening on the 32nd floor of any particular building. Traffic, sky, morning light on glass. Diana pushed the profile sheet back across the desk, not away from her but toward the center, a neutral position, a place where both of them could reach it. She said, "Tell me what you know about their Eastern Corridor operation." Kara told her. It took 40 minutes. She was thorough in the way her father was thorough, which is to say completely. When she was done, Diana nodded once, slowly. She picked up her pen and wrote 3 words on her notepad, turned it slightly toward Kara so she could read them. Schedule a call. Kara said she would need to speak with her father before scheduling anything. Diana said that was entirely fair. She waited until Kara had left the office, the door closing with a quiet click, before she set down her pen and sat with the weight of what had just happened. Not the business of it, the other part. She had said 3 words in a lobby to a man she had never looked at long enough to see. She had said them and walked out into a car in a day that felt, in the moment, important. She had moved through that day, and the day after, and weeks of days, and the words had dissolved the way small unkindnesses always do when the person who says them has no reason to hold on to them. The person who receives them holds on to them differently. She knew that. She was old enough to know that. She picked up her phone and asked her assistant to pull the visitor log from 6 weeks ago. The visitor log was on her desk by noon. Diana sat with it, the way she sat with difficult things, at an angle to them, not looking directly at first, letting her eyes adjust. She found the entry quickly. It was not buried or complicated. It was clean and clear, the way all visitor logs are, indifferent and precise. Marcus A. Webb, Webcore Logistics, 11:15 in the morning, meeting with Paul in acquisitions. Check-in time noted. Duration of visit, 45 minutes. She read it twice. Then she called Paul. Paul answered immediately. He was the kind of employee who answered immediately, thorough and reliable, in the way that some people are thorough and reliable, not because they are brilliant, but because they care about doing things right. It was a quality Diana respected more than she had always admitted. She asked him about the Webcore meeting. He told her about it without hesitation. The numbers had been strong. Marcus Webb had been measured and precise. The proposal was one of the better ones he had seen in the past year. He had sent a follow-up email within the week, per standard procedure. Diana asked how Marcus had responded to the follow-up. Paul was quiet for a moment. He said the response had been polite, professional. Marcus had said he was considering his options and would be back in touch. He had not been back in touch. Diana said thank you and ended the call. She sat for a long moment, looking at Charlotte through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. The city was going about its business. Trucks on the highway below. A delivery vehicle double-parked on the corner. The ordinary machinery of commerce, running as it always ran, indifferent to the conversations happening above it. She thought about what Paul had said, considering his options. She knew what that meant. She had used those words herself, in different contexts, when she wanted to close a door without closing it entirely, when she wanted to leave without making the leaving into a scene. She picked up her phone again. This time she called her head of research, a woman named Carol, who had been with the firm for 12 years, and who knew the logistics sector the way some people know languages, fluently, and with an accent that told you where she had learned it. She asked Carol to pull everything available on Webcore Logistics, not the surface material, the deep file, financials, growth trajectory, operational structure, competitive positioning, everything. Carol said she could have it by end of day. Diana said she would like it in 2 hours if possible. The file arrived in 90 minutes. She read it straight through without stopping. By the time she finished, the afternoon light had moved across the floor of her office from one wall to the other. Her coffee was cold. She had not noticed either of these things. The numbers were not good. They were extraordinary. 340 million in assets, 0 acquisition debt, a driver retention rate that was the highest in the sector, by a margin that should not have been possible. Margins on regional contracts that suggested an operational model built on genuine efficiency, rather than cost-cutting, which is a difference that only people who understand logistics from the inside can fully appreciate. No investors. No venture capital. No partners. A man in a folding table storage unit who had built something from nothing, one contract at a time, over 17 years, while raising a daughter alone. She put the file down. She thought about the lobby. She thought about the truck. She thought about the 3 words she had said, reflexively, without thought, the way people say things when they are not paying attention, when the moment is small enough to throw away. She had thrown away the moment. She had not thrown away the man. He had walked out of her building and made her irrelevant to his timeline by doing what he had always done, by moving forward without requiring anything from her. She picked up her phone and called the Webcor main line. The assistant who answered was professional in a particular way. The way that indicates that the person on the other end of the call is not scrambling to sound good, but is simply good. She gave her name. She asked to speak with Marcus Webb. The assistant said Mr. Webb was unavailable and asked if she would like to leave a message. She left her name and number. The callback took 4 days. She expected this. She was not insulted by it. She was, if she was being honest with herself, the appropriate audience for a 4-day callback, given everything. She had earned the wait. She sat with that fact quietly, the way she sat with difficult things, not looking away from it. When her phone rang on the 4th day, a Thursday, late afternoon, she picked it up before the second ring. His voice was even, no edge in it, no performance of calm, just calm itself, the real kind, the kind that does not need to announce itself. He said, "Miss Voss." She said, "Mr. Webb. Thank you for calling back." A pause, brief and clean. He said, "I appreciated the time Paul gave the meeting, and I appreciated you teaching my daughter." She heard the sentence the way it was meant, not as a weapon, not as forgiveness either, as a fact, delivered at the exact weight it carried, no more and no less. She said, "She's exceptional." He said, "I know." Another pause. She could hear, very faintly, what sounded like a highway in the background, or a wind, some large outdoor space. She said, "I would like to revisit the conversation you had with Paul, formally, at a level that reflects what Webcor actually represents." He did not answer immediately. When he did, he said, "I want to be honest with you, Ms. Voss. I've had conversations with 2 other firms since the Charlotte meeting. Both of them are moving forward." She had expected this also. She said, "I understand. I'd ask for the opportunity to make a case regardless." He said, "I'll consider it." She said, "That's all I'm asking." He said he would have his team reach out the following week to set a time. She thanked him. He said, "Ms. Voss." She said, "Yes." He said, "The blue tie was my daughter's suggestion. I thought you should know that." And then he said goodbye, professional and complete, and the call ended. And Diana sat in her office on the 32nd floor, with the phone still in her hand, looking at the city below, thinking about a blue tie in a lobby she had not been paying attention to. She set the phone down. She thought, "I need to be better than the version of myself that was in that lobby." She was not sure yet if she was, but she intended to find out. The following week, a Monday, Kara found her father in the kitchen of his hotel suite in Charlotte, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee, looking out the window at a street that was just beginning to move. He was in the blue tie again. She had told him to wear it. He had not argued. She sat down at the small table by the window and watched him for a moment. He was 51 now, though he did not look it in the way that means he had tried to prevent it. He looked 51 in the way that means he had lived all 51 years completely. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there 10 years ago. His hair was gray at the temples. He moved through a room the way he had always moved through rooms. Slowly, completely without performance, taking up exactly the amount of space he needed, and no more. She had spent her whole life learning to read that quality in him, the stillness that was not passivity, but something more like certainty. A certainty about who he was, that did not need anything from the outside world to confirm it. She thought about what she knew, about the parking lot, about what had been said. She had heard it from an unlikely source, one of the other interns who had been in the lobby that morning for an early orientation session, who had mentioned it to another intern, who had mentioned it in a general conversation that Kara had been present for, not knowing who Kara was or what the story meant. She had been very still in that conversation. She had filed the information the way she filed everything important, in a place where she could look at it without it running her. She had not told her father that she knew. She was not going to tell him now. It was not her story to carry for him, and he would not want her to carry it. What she had done was something else. She had gone back to Diana Voss's office on a Tuesday, the week after the profile sheet conversation, and she had done something she had never done in a professional setting before. She had asked for a moment that was not about business. Diana had looked at her with a kind of careful attention. Kara had said, without drama and without softness, that she wanted to tell her something, not as the intern with the analysis, as Marcus Webb's daughter. Diana had said, all right. Kara had told her about the storage unit, about the folding table, about the notebooks, about coming home from school to find her father on the phone with a client at 6 in the morning, before she was even awake, about the way he had built WebCore one careful decision at a time, about the truck and what it meant, not as a symbol but as a simple fact, a vehicle that worked, driven by a man who had never needed anyone to see him to know what he was worth. She had said all of this calmly. She was not asking for anything. She was not accusing Diana of anything specific. She was simply making sure that the next conversation Diana had with her father, if there was one, was had by a person who understood who she was speaking to. When she finished, Diana had not said anything for a long moment. Then she had said, I owe your father an apology. Kara had said, that's between you and him. She had stood up and left the office the way she had entered it, without fuss. Now, in the hotel suite on Monday morning, her father turned from the window and looked at her. Ready? He said. She said, you? He picked up his folder from the counter, cream-colored, not thick, the same kind he always used. He straightened his tie in the window reflection for a moment, not because he needed to, just out of habit. They drove to Meridian in her rental car, because she had offered, and he had said fine. The lobby was the same cold marble, the same high ceiling, the same way sound arrived a half-second late. The receptionist looked up when they came in. This time he did not look past Marcus. They were expected. Paul met them at the elevator. He shook Marcus's hand and said it was good to have him back and meant it. They went up to the 32nd floor. The meeting was not in a standard conference room. It was in Diana's office, which Kara had been in before and Marcus had not. He walked in and looked around the room the way he always looked at new spaces. Not quickly, not with performance, just taking it in. Diana Voss stood up when they came in. She did not lead with the business. She led with something else. She looked at Marcus directly and said, without preamble, without softening or over-explanation, I said something in the lobby of this building the last time you were here that I should not have said. I am sorry for it. The room was quiet. Marcus looked at her, the same look he had given her in the lobby 6 weeks ago, clear and even, carrying nothing extra. He said, I appreciate you saying that. Not, it's fine. Not, I'd forgotten. Not, it doesn't matter. He appreciated her saying that, because it mattered that she said it, and it was enough. Diana nodded once. They sat down. The meeting lasted 2 hours. It was the most substantive conversation about WebCore that Marcus had ever had with anyone outside the company, which was saying a great deal, because Marcus did not have conversations he did not find substantive. Every number was examined. Every operational model was explained and questioned and explained again. Kara sat to her father's left and said almost nothing, which was the most eloquent thing she could have done, because her silence said that the man sitting beside her did not need her to speak for him. At the end of the 2 hours, Diana made an offer. It was a fair offer, not generous but fair, and fairness was what Marcus had always asked for, not more, just the actual value of the actual thing. He said he would review it with his team and respond within 2 weeks. Diana said that was completely reasonable. They shook hands. As Marcus and Kara walked to the elevator, Diana said, Mr. Webb. He turned. She said, the truck is still in the lot, from what I understand. Your assistant said you drove it up. He said, it runs. Diana said, I can see that. She said it without irony, without anything layered under it, Just a simple acknowledgement, given directly, which was the only kind Marcus Webb had ever had any use for. He nodded. The elevator doors opened. He and Kara rode down to the lobby in silence. They crossed the marble floor and pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot, and stood for a moment in the Charlotte afternoon. The F-150 was between two black sedans, same as before. The zip tie was still on the tailgate. The crack in the bumper caught the afternoon light the same way it always did. Kara looked at the truck, and then at her father. She said, "Are you ever going to replace it?" He looked at her, then at the truck. He considered the question the way he considered all questions. Completely, without hurry. He said, "It gets me where I'm going." He got in. The engine knocked once. Settled. She got in beside him. He pulled out of the space between the two black sedans and drove out of the Meridian Capital lot, the truck moving the way it always moved, steady and a little loud, unbothered by the clean cars around it, unbothered by the glass building behind it, unbothered by anything at all, because nothing about the outside of a thing determines the worth of what it carries. He had known that since year 2. He had never unlearned it. Kara watched the building disappear in the side mirror as they turned onto the street. She thought about her mother, who had read notebooks at a kitchen table and told a young man that what he knew was worth more than what he was being paid to ignore. She thought about a storage unit and a folding table and a man who showed up to every single day his life gave him and treated each one as a thing worth building something inside. She looked at her father, who was watching the road with both hands on the wheel, steady and at ease, and entirely himself. She said, she apologized before she even opened the meeting. He said, "I know." She said, "What did you think of that?" He was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them, an intersection, a light, the ordinary world, doing what it does. He said, "I thought she was someone worth working with." Kara nodded. Outside, Charlotte was going on without them. Trucks on the highway. A delivery van pulled to the curb. The machinery of the world, moving as it always moved, carrying things from one place to another, most of it without being seen. Most of it doing exactly what it was built to do.